He was the kind of man people stopped noticing, not because he lacked presence, but because he gave up the performance. Somewhere along the line, the applause stopped making sense. He found himself in the quiet hours of the night, sitting in the dim kitchen light, wondering who he had become when no one was watching. The version of himself that smiled for others felt like a costume stitched too tight, and beneath it something raw pulsed, a question, persistent and aching. What if I just disappeared? Not in the tragic sense, not in running away, but in stepping back, intentionally, completely. A vanishing that wasn't about escape, but about preservation. About reclaiming the parts of himself he had given away in pieces. In conversations he didn't believe in smiles that cost too much, in goals that weren't even his. There, in the silence, the idea took shape. Go dark, go still, and begin again, not for the world, but for the soul. He started with the obvious. Silence. Not just the kind that comes from turning off his phone or avoiding small talk. It was a deeper kind of quiet, a refusal to explain himself, to perform his pain, to justify his choices. He stopped posting, stopped oversharing, stopped reaching out to people who only knew how to mirror noise. At first, it felt like loss, like disappearing from a stage mid-act. But slowly, that silence became a sanctuary, and for the first time in years, he could hear himself think without interruption. There were days the isolation stung like withdrawal. The mind, addicted to validation, screamed for attention. His fingers hovered over his screen, hungry to be seen. But he didn't give in. He let the discomfort burn, because deep down he knew this was the detox, the shedding of needing to be understood, of needing to be admired. In its place, something quieter took root. Presence. A stillness that whispered, "You're allowed to exist without performing." He began observing his patterns like a quiet scientist, without judgment, only curiosity. The way he reached for distractions when boredom crept in. The way his mind replayed old conversations, trying to rewrite the past. The subtle ways he sought approval, even in silence. It was humbling to see how much of his identity was built around being seen. But now, in the absence of an audience, the performance unraveled. And underneath he found a strange kind of honesty, a rawness that didn't need to be impressive, just real. Every day became a ritual, not of productivity, but of alignment. He mapped his goals with precision, quietly, privately. No declarations, no witnesses. He trained his body like it was an act of devotion. He studied as if he were rebuilding his mind from the inside out. Each action was small, intentional, and invisible to the world. And that invisibility became power. Because for the first time, his progress wasn't performative. It was sacred. And sacred things don't ask to be seen. They ask to be respected. There were no shortcuts, no lightning strikes of motivation, just repetition. Quiet, disciplined repetition. He woke up before the sun not to impress anyone, but because it anchored him. He said no to distractions, not out of arrogance, but out of protection. Every choice became a boundary, every habit a brick in the new foundation. And in the solitude he started to see it clearly. Freedom isn't found in doing whatever you want. It's found in doing what's necessary, even when no one claps for it. The world didn't notice his absence. No texts asking where he went. No crowds missing his voice. At first that stung, but then he realized that was the point. Disappearing wasn't punishment. It was purification. Without the pressure to be someone for everyone, he could finally become someone for himself. And the more he detached from being seen, the more he saw. Not just the world, but his own patterns, his own strength, his own silence. It was all still there, waiting for him to come home to it. He learned to sit with discomfort, to breathe through it instead of running. When the old fears came knocking, fear of failure, fear of being forgotten, he didn't chase them away. He listened to what they were really saying. Please don't change. Because fear isn't the enemy, it's the voice of the past, begging you to stay familiar. But he wasn't interested in being familiar anymore. He was interested in becoming, and becoming always requires the death of what came before. Not all days were graceful. Some mornings he felt hollow. Some nights he questioned everything. But even in those moments, he didn't break the silence. He didn't run back to old comforts. Instead, he let the stillness hold him. He let the ache stay. Because he understood now, growth isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It happens quietly, in the background, like a seed breaking open beneath the soil, unseen, uncelebrated, but absolutely alive. In the solitude, he began rewriting the script, no longer driven by proving something to the world, but by aligning with something deeper. His goals weren't about status anymore. They were about structure, about building a life that supported who he truly was, not who he was expected to be. He traded performance for presence, external validation for internal clarity, and for the first time, success stopped feeling like a race and started feeling like a rhythm. People began to ask where he had gone. Some said he changed. Others said he became distant, but they didn't understand. He hadn't vanished. He had returned to himself. What they saw as distance was really depth. What they called isolation was devotion. They couldn't recognize it because it wasn't meant for them. It was never about disappearing from them. It was about reappearing to himself. And that, he realized, was the quiet revolution he had been waiting for all along. He no longer needed to explain his silence. He had outgrown the language of needing to be understood. There was a peace now, not loud or triumphant, but steady, like the breath after a storm. He moved differently, spoke with intention, listened without needing to respond. His power no longer came from proving, but from knowing. And in that knowing, he found a deeper kind of confidence, the kind that doesn't seek attention, because it's already whole. Every version of his old self still lived inside him. The performer, the people-pleaser, the man afraid to be invisible. But now, he could look at them without flinching. He could thank them for getting him this far, and let them go. Because the man he was becoming didn't need the crowd. He needed the quiet, the discipline, the space between reaction and response. And in that space, he wasn't just healing, he was choosing, moment by moment, breath by breath, rebuilding a life that felt like truth. Eventually, he stopped waiting for the transformation to feel dramatic. He realized change doesn't always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it's a quiet shift in posture, a deeper breath, a clearer boundary. The old version of him would have craved recognition, applause, proof. But the man in the mirror now only asked one thing. Are you living in alignment with who you say you want to be? And that question, asked daily, lived honestly, was more powerful than any spotlight. He never really reappeared. Not in the way people expected. Because when you transform in silence, you don't return to prove anything. You stay in motion. You live from a new center. And maybe the world never notices the change. Maybe no one claps. But inside, there's a stillness that can't be shaken. A life built quietly, brick by brick in the shadows. Not for show, not for applause, just for peace. And for the first time, that was more than enough.